Richard Hayes, a ruthless 45-year-old CEO of Hayes Industries in Chicago, rules his corporate empire with an iron fist. Known for his explosive temper and impossible standards, he's driven away countless employees, assistants, and even family members. His penthouse office is a fortress of fear, where grown executives tremble at his voice. When the company's executive chef quits after a particularly brutal confrontation, no one expects much from Maria Santos, a 38-year-old single mother from Southside Chicago who desperately needs the job. But Maria carries something Richard has never encountered, the quiet strength of someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. What starts as a simple meal service becomes a collision of two worlds that will transform both their lives forever. Before we begin, tell us, what city or country are you watching this story from? It's always incredible to know how far these narratives reach. The elevator climbed to the 47th floor of Hayes Tower, each floor marking another level of corporate hell that Maria Santos was ascending into. Her worn leather bag contained nothing more than her knife roll, a folded apron, and the kind of desperation that makes people take jobs they know they shouldn't. "Ma'am, I have to warn you," whispered Jennifer, the nervous HR assistant who had barely made eye contact during their brief meeting. "Mr. Hayes, he's not like other executives. The last chef lasted exactly 3 days." Maria adjusted her grip on the bag. At 38, she'd worked in enough Chicago kitchens to know difficult bosses, but she needed this job. Her son Miguel's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves, and her savings account had hit zero 2 weeks ago. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime that felt more like a death knell. Richard Hayes stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, his silhouette sharp against the Chicago skyline. Even from behind, his presence filled the room like a storm cloud. His tailored suit probably cost more than Maria made in 3 months at her last job. "You're 7 minutes late," he said without turning around. His voice was controlled, precise, and somehow more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. The security check downstairs took longer than— "I don't want excuses." He turned slowly, and Maria got her first good look at the man every employee in this building feared. Richard Hayes was tall, lean, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that looked like they could slice through steel. "I want solutions. Can you provide solutions, Miss Santos?" Maria Santos. She didn't flinch under his stare. "And yes, I can." Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe at her steady tone. "The previous chef assured me he could handle my dietary requirements. He lasted 3 days before he started crying in my kitchen. Actually crying." Richard walked behind his massive desk, each step calculated. "Do you cry, Miss Santos?" "Not over work." "Good, because I don't tolerate weakness." He pulled out a leather folder and slapped it on the desk. "My requirements are non-negotiable. Meals at exactly 8 a.m., 12:30 p.m., and 6 p.m. No dairy, no gluten, no sugar substitutes that taste like disappointment. Everything fresh, everything perfect. One mistake, one late delivery, one moment of the mediocrity I've come to expect from your predecessors, and you're gone." Questions. Maria stepped forward and opened the folder. The dietary restrictions were complex but not impossible. What caught her attention was the handwriting in the margins, notes about flavor preferences, crossed out items, small adjustments that revealed someone who actually cared about food beyond just fuel. "Oh, your previous chef tried to give you quinoa bowls for lunch," she said, reading between the lines of his notations. Tasteless health food that he claimed was nutritionally optimal. Richard's jaw tightened. "I'd rather starve." "You wrote 'needs salt, needs life' in the margin next to Tuesday's menu." He paused. No one had ever read his notes before. "Your point?" "My point is, you don't just want fuel. You want food that reminds you why eating matters." Maria closed the folder. "I can do that." For the first time since she'd entered the room, Richard Hayes looked genuinely interested, rather than just predatorily watchful. "The kitchen is through that door. Your trial period starts now, lunch in 90 minutes. As Maria walked toward the private kitchen that connected to his office, she heard him call out, "Miss Santos." She turned back. "The last chef asked me about my preferences, my schedule, my business needs. You haven't asked me a single question about myself." "I don't need to." His eyebrows raised slightly. "Is that so?" "Your office tells me everything I need to know." Maria gestured around the pristine space. "No personal photos, no clutter, no signs that anyone else has ever been welcome here. You eat alone, you work alone, and you've convinced yourself that's strength. But your notes in that folder, they tell a different story. You're not looking for a chef, Mr. Hayes. You're looking for someone who gives a damn." The silence that followed was deafening. In any other job with any other boss, what she'd just said would have gotten her fired before she'd even started. But Richard Hayes didn't fire her. Instead, he sat down at his desk and did something that probably hadn't happened in this office in years. He smiled. Not a warm smile, not a kind smile, but a smile that acknowledged he'd just encountered something unexpected. 90 minutes, Miss Santos, don't disappoint me. Maria nodded and walked into the kitchen, closing the door behind her. She'd worked in restaurant kitchens where celebrity chefs threw plates and screamed until grown men quit mid-shift. She'd survived dinner rushes that would break most people and managed a household budget that would make a mathematician weep. But as she tied her apron and surveyed the pristine, barely used kitchen that probably cost more than her entire apartment, she realized this wasn't about cooking at all. This was about two people who had learned to build walls so high that they'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. And for the first time in months, Maria Santos felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. Outside the kitchen door, Richard Hayes stared at the folder Maria had left on his desk, still open to the page where he'd written his frustrated notes. No one had ever read them before. No one had ever cared enough to try. He had exactly 87 minutes to figure out what he was going to do about Maria Santos. 87 minutes later, Richard Hayes was expecting another failure. They always failed. The previous chef had presented him with something that looked like art and tasted like cardboard. The one before that had served portions so small, Richard had ordered pizza afterward. The one before that had simply walked out without explanation, leaving behind only a note that said, "Find someone else to abuse." But when the knock came at his office door at exactly 12:30 p.m., something was different. The aroma that preceded Maria Santos into his office made him actually look up from his computer screen. "Lunch is served, Mr. Hayes." Maria set the tray on his desk with steady hands. No nervous trembling, no apologetic rambling about ingredients or cooking times, just quiet confidence. Richard looked down at the plate and felt something he hadn't experienced in months: genuine curiosity. The presentation was simple but elegant: seared salmon with a crust that looked properly caramelized, roasted vegetables that actually had color instead of the sad steamed disappointments he usually received, and rice that wasn't trying to be anything more than perfectly cooked rice. "What's the sauce?" he asked, noting the small ramekin beside the salmon. "Lemon herb butter. Real butter, fresh herbs from the market down on Michigan Avenue. The salmon is wild-caught, not farm-raised. You can tell by the color and the texture." Maria stood back, watching his reaction. "Try it." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a quiet command, and Richard couldn't remember the last time someone had given him one. He took a bite of the salmon, and for a moment, the constantly churning machinery of his mind went quiet. The fish was perfectly cooked, crispy skin, flesh that flaked just right, and a flavor that reminded him of something he couldn't quite place. "Where did you learn to cook?" he asked, already reaching for another bite. "My grandmother's kitchen in Pilsen. She came from Guadalajara with nothing but her recipes and the belief that food should tell a story." Maria's voice carried a warmth he wasn't used to hearing in his office. "She taught me that you can't cook good food if you don't care about the people eating it." Richard paused mid-chew. "Is that supposed to be some kind of philosophical statement?" "It's supposed to be the truth." Maria met his eyes without flinching. "You want to know why your previous chefs failed? Because they were cooking for their paychecks, not for you. And you're different. I'm desperate enough to care." The honesty in her voice caught him off guard. "My son needs surgery, Mr. Hayes. His insurance only covers 60%, and I need this job to cover the rest. So yes, I'm going to care about whether your lunch makes you feel human for 5 minutes out of your day." The office fell silent, except for the distant hum of Chicago traffic 47 floors below. Richard finished his meal in that silence, and Maria stood waiting, not fidgeting or checking her phone like everyone else did around him. "Your son," he said finally. "How old?" 12. "His name is Miguel." Maria's voice softened just enough to reveal the worry she carried. "He has a heart condition. Nothing life-threatening if we can get the surgery, but surgery costs money you don't have." "Surgery costs money I didn't have until this morning." Richard pushed the empty plate away and leaned back in his chair. "Tell me about the rice." The subject change was so abrupt that Maria blinked. "The rice? It's perfect. Not mushy, not dry, every grain separate. Most people can't cook rice properly to save their lives, but yours is restaurant quality. How? You toast it first, just for a minute in a dry pan until it starts to smell nutty. Then you add your liquid, chicken stock, not water, and you treat it with respect instead of just dumping it in a pot and hoping for the best. Respect for rice. Respect for everything. The ingredients, the process, the person eating it. Maria collected the empty plate. Food is about connection, Mr. Hayes, even when you're eating alone. Richard stood and walked to his window, hands clasped behind his back. Miss Santos, in the 15 years I've been CEO of this company, do you know how many people have told me that I need more human connection in my life? I'd guess everyone who's worked closely with you. Correct. Therapists, executives, board members, family members I no longer speak to, they all had opinions about my need for warmth, for softness, for the kind of emotional availability that makes people comfortable. He turned to face her. Do you know what I told them all? That they were wrong? That they were fired? Richard's smile was sharp as a blade. But you didn't tell me I need connection, Miss Santos. You just gave it to me without asking permission. Maria felt her breath catch. I just made you lunch. No, you made me remember what good food tastes like. There's a difference. He returned to his desk and picked up his phone. Jennifer, clear my calendar for the next 10 minutes. I don't care about the Henderson meeting. Reschedule it. He hung up and looked at Maria. Dinner, 6 p.m. Same standards, same expectations, but I want you to tell me more about this respect philosophy of yours. Mr. Hayes, Richard, if you're going to lecture me about treating food with respect, you can call me by my name. As Maria left his office with the empty lunch tray, she felt something shift in the air between them. It was subtle, like the first hint of spring after a brutal Chicago winter, but it was there. Richard watched her go, then picked up his phone again. This time he dialed a number he hadn't called in months. Dr. Morrison, it's Richard Hayes. I need you to tell me everything you can about pediatric heart surgery costs. No, it's not for me. It's for someone who just reminded me that some things are worth investing in. If this story is touching you in some way, comment and tell us where you're watching from. Every place has its own struggles, and sometimes it's incredible to see how we all connect through such human stories. The dinner tray sat untouched on Richard's desk at 6:47 p.m. For the first time in years, he wasn't eating alone in his sterile office. Instead, he stood in his private kitchen watching Maria Santos teach him how to properly season cast iron. You have to respect the metal, Maria said, running her hand along the surface of the pan. This skillet is probably older than both of us, but someone took care of it. See how smooth it is? That's generations of love. Richard found himself leaning against the counter, something he'd never done in his own kitchen. You talk about everything like it has feelings. Because everything does in a way. This pan has memory. It remembers every meal, every cook who used it. Your grandmother's hands probably touched this surface. Maria looked up at him. Where did you get it? The question hit Richard like a punch to the chest. He'd avoided looking at that skillet for months, had ordered his previous chefs to use the expensive new cookware instead. It belonged to my mother. Tell me about her. She's dead. The words came out harsher than he intended. Car accident 3 years ago. We didn't speak much before she died. Maria's hands stilled on the pan. Because of who you'd become. Richard's jaw tightened. Because she couldn't accept the choices I'd made, the sacrifices required to build something lasting. He gestured around the office. She thought I'd lost my soul somewhere along the way to building an empire. Had you? The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Richard had been asked many things in his life, about profit margins, market strategies, hostile takeovers, but no one had ever asked him about his soul. I thought I'd traded it for something more valuable. His voice was quieter now. Success, security, the kind of power that means you never have to depend on anyone else. And now I'm not sure what I have. Richard picked up the skillet, feeling its weight. She left me this along with a note that said, remember who you were before you forgot how to love. I threw the note away, kept the pan in storage until I moved into this office. Maria resumed seasoning the cast iron with gentle circular motions. What did you love? Before? The question unlocked something Richard had kept buried for so long he'd forgotten it existed. Cooking. Saturday mornings with my mother in our tiny kitchen in Wicker Park. She'd let me crack the eggs for French toast, and we'd listen to jazz on this old radio that only worked if you held the antenna just right. What happened to that boy? He grew up. He learned that love makes you vulnerable, that trust gets you hurt, that the only person you can rely on is yourself. Richard set the skillet down harder than necessary. He learned that sentiment is a luxury successful people can't afford. Or maybe, Maria said, never breaking rhythm with her movements, he learned to be afraid. I'm not afraid of anything. Liar. The word was soft but absolute. You're terrified of being the person you used to be. You think kindness is weakness, that caring about someone gives them power over you. So you built this fortress. She gestured around the pristine office and called it strength. Richard felt his familiar anger rising, the same fury that had sent dozens of employees running from his office in tears. But when he opened his mouth to unleash it, he found something else instead. She was driving to see me, he said, the words falling out of him like stones. 3 years ago, I'd missed her birthday, missed Christmas, missed everything that mattered to her. So she got in her car in the middle of a snowstorm because she wanted to bring me homemade soup. Said I looked too thin in the newspaper photos. Maria's hands stopped moving. I was in a board meeting when she called, sent it to voicemail. The last thing my mother ever said to me was left on a recording I didn't listen to until after the funeral. His voice cracked. She said she loved me, that she was proud of who I was becoming, even if she didn't understand it. That she hoped someday I'd find my way back to the boy who used to help her make French toast. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of 3 years' worth of grief Richard had never let himself feel. The soup, Maria said quietly. Was she bringing the soup in this pot? Richard nodded, unable to trust his voice. Then let's make soup. What? Let's make soup. In your mother's pot, with your mother's skillet. Let's remember who you were before you forgot how to love. Maria moved toward the refrigerator. Do you remember what kind she made? Chicken and rice, with carrots and celery and... Richard found himself following her, drawn by something he couldn't name. She always said the secret was in the sofrito. Then teach me. For the next hour, Richard Hayes, CEO of a billion-dollar company, man who struck fear into the hearts of grown executives, stood in his private kitchen teaching Maria Santos how to make his dead mother's soup. His hands shook as he diced onions. His voice broke as he explained how his mother always hummed while she cooked. And for the first time in 3 years, Richard Hayes cried. Not the angry tears of frustration he'd shed alone in his penthouse apartment, but the deep, cleansing tears of a son who'd finally found his way back to his mother's kitchen. Maria stood beside him, not touching, not offering empty comfort, just being present while he fell apart and put himself back together again. When the soup was done, they sat at the small table in his kitchen and ate in companionable silence. Outside, Chicago glittered in the darkness, but inside, something had shifted irrevocably between them. Maria, Richard said finally. Yes? Miguel's surgery. How much do you still need? The question made her freeze, spoon halfway to her mouth. Richard, I can't let you... How much? 43,000, but I'm not asking you for... Consider it done. The simple words hit Maria like lightning. What? The surgery. It's covered. I'll have the payment sent to the hospital tomorrow. Richard met her eyes across the table. No strings, no conditions, just let me do this one decent thing. Maria's soup spoon clattered to the table. I can't accept that. Yes, you can. Because someone needs to start somewhere, and I'd like it to be with the person who reminded me that I still have a soul worth saving. 6 months later, the changes in Hayes Industries were the stuff of corporate legend. The man who once made grown executives weep now held monthly lunches with department heads, not to tear them apart, but to actually listen. The CEO who had fired assistants for breathing too loudly now asked about their families, remembered their children's names, sent flowers when someone's parent died. But the most profound change wasn't in the boardrooms or the employee satisfaction surveys that had skyrocketed from toxic workplace to employer of choice. The most profound change was in the private kitchen on the 47th floor, where every day at 12:30 p.m., Richard Hayes shared lunch with Maria Santos and talked about everything except business. Miguel's doing well? Richard asked, watching Maria plate their lunch with the same careful attention she'd shown from day one. Better than well. The doctors say his recovery is remarkable. Maria's smile was radiant. He starts high school in the fall, wants to study business so he can be like Mr. Richard someday. God help him, Richard said, but his tone was warm. Though I suppose there are worse role models than the reformed version of me. Reformed? Maria raised an eyebrow as she sat across from him. You were never broken, Richard, just buried. It had become their daily ritual. Lunch followed by conversation that ranged from Miguel's progress to Richard's tentative efforts to rebuild relationships with his estranged siblings. They'd found a rhythm that worked, a friendship built on shared meals and honest words. But today felt different. Richard had been unusually quiet all morning, and Maria had caught him staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. There's something I need to tell you, he said, setting down his fork. Maria's stomach tightened. In her experience, conversations that started this way never ended well. What is it? The board is pressuring me to expand operations to the West Coast, Seattle specifically. They want me there to oversee the transition personally. Richard's hands fidgeted with his napkin, a nervous gesture she'd never seen from him before. It would mean relocating for at least 2 years. The words hit Maria like cold water. She'd grown comfortable in this routine, this unexpected friendship with a man who'd transformed from tyrant to confidant. The thought of him leaving felt like losing something she hadn't realized she'd been holding on to. "When would you go?" she asked, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "That's the thing." Richard leaned forward. "I'm not going." "What?" "I turned them down, told them to send someone else, that my responsibilities here are more important." He met her eyes. "They think I've lost my mind." "Have you?" "Probably." Richard's smile was self-deprecating. 6 months ago I would have jumped at the chance. New challenge, bigger market, another mountain to climb. But now I have something here worth staying for. The weight of his words settled between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Maria felt her heart speed up, but she kept her voice careful, neutral. "The company needs you here," she said. "Maria," Richard's voice was quiet, but firm. "I'm not talking about the company." The silence that followed was deafening. Maria had felt this tension building between them for weeks. Moments when their conversations went deeper than friendship, touches that lingered a second too long when he helped her carry groceries, looks that spoke volumes neither had been brave enough to voice. "Richard, I know this complicates things," he said quickly. "I know there's a power dynamic here, that I'm your employer, that this could all go spectacularly wrong, but I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is just gratitude." Maria's breath caught. "What do you feel?" "Like I've been sleepwalking through my life for years and you woke me up." Richard stood and moved to the window, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Like maybe all the walls I built to protect myself just kept me from living. Like maybe it's not too late to be the man my mother hoped I could become." Maria joined him at the window, standing close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Your mother would be proud of who you've become. Would she? Or would she say I'm still too afraid to take the leap?" "What leap?" Richard turned to face her, and Maria saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Vulnerability mixed with hope, fear tempered by determination. The leap that says maybe I don't have to do this alone anymore. Maybe letting someone in isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing I could do. His hand found hers, tentative at first, then sure when she didn't pull away. "I'm in love with you, Maria. Completely, terrifyingly, life-changingly in love with you." The confession hung in the air between them, and for a moment, Maria couldn't breathe. She thought about Miguel, healthy and happy and planning his future. She thought about the job that had saved them both. She thought about the man who had terrified her 6 months ago, and the man standing before her now, vulnerable, hopeful, human. "I love you too," she whispered, and watched his face transform with wonder. When he kissed her, it tasted like possibility, like second chances and new beginnings, like the promise that some walls are meant to come down. Later, as they planned their future together, Richard stepping back from day-to-day operations, Maria opening her own restaurant with his backing, Miguel getting the college fund he'd never dreamed possible, Maria thought about the job interview that had changed everything. She'd walked into Hayes Tower desperate and afraid, expecting to serve meals to a monster. Instead, she'd found a man who'd forgotten how to be human and helped him remember. She'd found love in the last place she'd expected it, with the last person she'd ever thought possible. "You know what the funny thing is?" Richard said, as they watched the sun set over Chicago from his office window. "What?" "Everyone was right to fear me. I was dangerous, to myself, to everyone around me. But you weren't afraid." "I was terrified," Maria admitted, "but I was more afraid of losing Miguel than I was of you. And now," Maria smiled, thinking of the boy who would grow up knowing that love could transform anyone, that kindness was the strongest force in the world, that sometimes the scariest people are just the most broken. "Now I'm only afraid that I'll wake up and this will all have been a dream." Richard pulled her closer. "Then let's make sure we stay awake. And now that you've made it this far, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Your presence matters, and your story does too."